Jeevaka and Sharmel, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us a very precious story of your journey over the past year. Both of you are nurses trained in the medical field. I wanted to invite you to share your journey over the past year in the context in which you have a very special, unique family with Shehan, your now teenage son, who is almost 14 in just less than a month now or so, and how over the course of the past several months you have lived life with COVID, with Shehan's developmental challenges, trying to balance life between your jobs as an administrator in healthcare, as a founder and president of Precious Arts Academy, a school for children with autism and developmental disorders. What happened?
Well, I can go back to March a year ago when the pandemic hit our county and the stay-home orders were implemented. And we found ourselves in a position at our school, Precious Arts Academy, where we had to shut down and we were not allowed to provide any more services for our children. Over the course of those 2 weeks, and actually a few days after, my mother passed away. And I was faced with having, grieving her loss, supporting my father and our family, plus at the same time trying to reestablish a new norm for Shehan in our home, who didn't have a school to go to, plus support the parents and students and families with what they were going to do facing the closure of our school.
December 24th came, the inevitable happened. One of the first were affected were you, Jeevaka. I remember talking to you on the phone. You were very upbeat, yet you were still human. You were not Superman. How was it for you to encounter this viral experience with COVID?
When I found out, the night before, I felt kind of chills, and I didn't have a high fever. But because I know the symptoms, I work in the hospital, so I told Sharmel, okay, there's something wrong, and I called my physician and got tested, and the test came positive. So I isolated myself, but for some reason or the other, I was not scared. Like I told you. Even in our Bible study, I wasn't scared about it. I'm like, okay, we all believe in a higher power, so I left it for God, and I'm like, that I had the faith that He'll take care of me. The most difficult part for me was, staying isolated and not seeing Shehan, and I walked around in the from the backyard, had a peep at Shehan when he was, playing around, when he had his sessions with the therapist. That was the hardest part, and I always thought about Sharmel too, how she's going to handle all this, and try to stay. It's hard to stay away from the family, obviously, as a parent, as a husband, but I had to do that to, protect everybody.
You recovered fairly well and quick from COVID. And oftentimes we see that the first attack may not be the last one and may not be the most vicious one. By December 30th, you were mostly recovered. But then, a few days later, the second attack came in a more personal and powerful way. January 9th. What happened?
January 9th, is a very tough day for us. we sat in the front living room to watch church, and Shehan was with me playing with his toys, so I was in the office room with him, and I came down I was trying to bring him up front, but he was not coming in. He liked to stay there, so I moved back with Sharmel and just put church on. Maybe 2 to 3 minutes, even the music stopped playing, his musical toy he was playing with. And Sharmel told me, hey, the music stopped. And I ran into the room to see the most horrified scene.
Shehan had started seizing, and Jeevaka called for me, and I ran into the room, and I could see Jeevaka just holding Shehan, and Shehan was convulsing. His eyes were rolling back, he was foaming at the mouth, his body was just contorted, and he was shaking and shaking, and I could see that this was not, this was a very big seizure that he was having. So immediately I knew I needed to get his rescue medication, which we've never had to use before. But I ran and I grabbed the phone, I grabbed the medication, and I came and I called 911. Where we live is a little bit remote, and it takes a little while for paramedics to get there. And that was one of the things we always said. If seizure starts, we call 911 to get them activated so they can get there in time. And so 911 was on the phone, and Jeevaka was crying. He was holding Shehan, and he was uncontrollably crying because it looked like we were about to lose our son.
Shehan stopped breathing. He was convulsing and severely, where I was moving with him. Then he stopped breathing. He was lifeless. And as a parent, you feel you're helpless. As I worked in the ER emergency room as a bedside nurse, so I had gone through multiple traumas, helping other people. But at this point, when it becomes your own, your skills go out the door, and only, I just prayed and asked God to be with him, and and it's just few minutes. I don't know. I felt like forever, and he started breathing again, and that was a huge relief. And the same time the paramedics came in, they were in the house. So because since we never seen such a long time, that when he was convulsing, for a longer period of time, and eventually stopped him breathing, we took him to the emergency room, where the second situation happened, where we got a room in the children's emergency room, and the nurses and everybody was very kind and doing everything very quickly for Shehan, and Shehan was asleep. He was hooked up to the monitors. He's in the post-ictal period, where after a convulsion, you feel like your body feels very tired. After maybe couple hours, Sharmel was in the bed with Shehan, and I was seated by the bedside. And suddenly Sharmel said, call the nurse, and because he started having the same, seizure, his whole body is shaking. So we called the nurse came in, and Shehan will not stop. It continued, and he set up to the monitor, his oxygenation dropping, and
They called the code team at
yeah.
that point.
They called the code team, and so I pulled Sharmel out. We were outside the door, and I could see from the glass door there was about maybe 14 to 18 people working with a couple of physicians in there, and I myself have been in codes. So either at that time you either make it or you won't. So I stepped out of the room, and I remember just looking at the tiles, and I was at peace at that time, and because I prayed and I said, God, if it is your will, you know what's best for him, and I'm okay with that. And I was not out of control. I was out of control at home.
He was so out of control that I couldn't even attend to Shehan. The paramedics were asking me on the phone, to count his breaths, but Jeevaka was inconsolable. He was crying, and Shehan was convulsing. I felt like I had two patients on my hands. I'm trying to calm him down and at the same time attend to Shehan. So in the ER, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but in the ER, when the code started on Shehan, Jeevaka and I were standing together, and trying to give room to everybody. But then it was interesting later on when we were talking about the story, we find ourselves separated. I'm in the room still in a corner, but Jeevaka is outside looking at the entire scene. In that moment, I was praying. We both were praying. I was praying, Lord, I'm not ready yet to lose him. I'm not ready yet. Please, Lord, let him make it through this. I'm not ready. Please, Lord, and begging for his life. But Jeevaka was praying a different prayer, I found out later.
I thought that was a time I had with the Lord. I did not have that much of strength to go on with this, but then when the code was going on and they were calling for respiratory therapy, which is, he's not breathing now, I was fine. I kept my conversation with the Lord, and I'm like, I'm okay. What do you want to do? So
You go from agony at home, from what I hear Sharmel say, to an inexplicable sense of peace.
yeah,
Even as the condition appears to escalate.
yeah. That is why I believe God was with me at that time to console and have that time. I can't put into words the peace I had in my heart and mind. I could still see all the chaos. When a code is called, people running, bringing tubes, bringing that. So I see everything happening. But still I was not disheartened about it, and it is strange to me. That's why I say it's real God that carried me through at that time. And I see Sharmel, with her mask on, I could see her praying, and I did pray too. But like she said, it was two different prayers. I didn't bargain with God. I'm like, let your will be done.
He's in charge.
And, yeah. So I was at peace at that time, and it's a beautiful, beautiful time that I had.
Must have been one of a very unique kind of encounters you've had with God. Have you experienced that in the past, or was this a very unique kind of encounter?
in the sense not as life and death, but throughout my career and for everything, sometimes people come to my office and ask how I'm doing all these things, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I just pray and leave my burdens or the challenges I'm facing to God. And I said, He put things in my head. He guided me in the right place. I said, there's no credit. I cannot take a single credit to who I am or what I have, to the blessings I have got. So even in life too, since I became a Christian, I wholeheartedly believe that. I'm like, God will see me through. God will guide me through, or us. So I didn't want to kind of challenge it or question why this happening. No. Even when Shehan was diagnosed, I never had, both of us. Why me? Why that? Why did it happen? And I knew there's something better going to happen, which I didn't know, had no clue. Right? We always say there's always something better will happen. There's a reason. The challenge we have is the human side of it. We believe it, but still we want to fix it ourselves, where it's like chasing a mirage. So I had given up on that. I pray and leave it up to God to see it through, and He always had come through.
Sharmel, one day you mentioned to me that the way you enjoy life with your family, with Shehan, is one day at a time. You don't think in terms of years, not even in terms of months or weeks. You receive and embrace every single day that the Lord gives you. That is a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that?
Life is a gift, Pastor Christian. One of the things with Dupe 15Q, which is a syndrome that our son has, is that at any moment in time, he could have sudden death. Could be cardiac related, could be respiratory related. It's unknown. And so every night we are faced with putting him to sleep, giving him a kiss, saying good night, and then walking away with that thought in our mind, could this be the last?
You have recovered from COVID. Shehan had recovered, had been discharged from the hospital. Will you see life any differently as things may return to pre-pandemic conditions? Or has your journey with the Lord forever changed the way that you do life?
I basically given up having plans. like we talk, or even the kids are singing every time. God has a plan for our lives, and absolutely. I myself had a lot of plans, but everything was thrown aside, and I had to work with His plan. So I stopped making plans. So my belief is to pray and surrender to Him, and leave everything in His hands, because He's ultimately in control. We had to adjust to His plan. So every event, there's something greater happening, and has happened. So we are, as parents, living examples of that with Shehan's situation. No parent would like to have a special needs child, but that taught us a lot of lessons. Rather than us teaching Shehan had taught a lot of lessons. And also God had opened so many avenues, so many doors with this, even with this terrible situation we think at that time. But He opened many doors to multiple people, and opened a school. We are, providing for many parents, students. We talk about God, and so our faith reflects, and that's why people come in, and random people come in, talk, and we pray, and so it's a beautiful thing. I go back to always the Philippians chapter 4 verse 5 to 7. We just create all this anxiety within ourselves for no reason. When we say pray and leave it up to God, it's pretty simple.
Sharmel.
I'd like to add, when you think about pre-pandemic, and we look back at our lives, and we live pretty simply, because of the restrictions or the limitations with Shehan. We don't get to socialize a lot. We don't, get to do a lot of things that other couples or young families do. But the one thing that has been constant pre-pandemic, if you would like to say, is God in our life, God in our relationship, God as the head of our household. He has really carried us through, because when it seems like we are having a hard day, a hard week, a hard month, the next month is actually even harder, and the following month is even capitalize and become more harder. It feels like this past 12 months. But when I look back, I can always see those two pairs of footprints carrying us, leading us, giving us the strength and the sustenance to get through each and every day. So why worry about tomorrow, when we know what's ahead of us, if we just live faithfully, praying every day, maintaining a close relationship with God, He will steer us in the right direction. And ultimately, heaven is where we want to be.
Jeevaka and Sharmel, I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor.